Welcome to another Firesides. Thank you all for being here. Today I have a special guest, Jeff Rippey. I always like to have my guests introduce themselves. I don't want to be the guy that missed and forgot the thing. So why don't you tell us your origin story?
That's a long and winding path. I like most acupuncturists, I think this is career number at least number 2 for me. It could be more. I knew you were gonna ask that question. I've been struggling with how to organize and condense.
Mm,
Um, so I got into Chinese medicine initially, because of my interest in the martial arts. So I've been a martial artist for better than 40 years now. I started out as a kid in the Japanese stuff. By the time I was in college, I was playing around with the Chinese stuff. By the time I was in my late 20s, I pretty much the only thing that I was working on was Tai Chi. And then I left the town that I went to college in and I moved to Kansas City. And as I was leaving, they hooked me up with a guy in KC. He taught Xingyi and Bagua. I was aware of those, but I had never actually practiced them. But in addition to that, he was an acupuncturist. And so when I moved to Kansas City, I started studying with him. And I studied with him for probably about 15 years. And at a certain point, that kind of evolved into an unstructured apprenticeship. And so studied with him for a while, then we left. My wife and I left Kansas City, we moved to Colorado. At the time, I was getting tired of dealing with the nonsense I was dealing with in the corporate world, and so I was looking around for something else to do, and my wife said, "Well, you know a lot about this Chinese medicine, what's the possibility there?" And so I ended up doing a program in Beijing. So I studied in China for a little while, and then I don't know how many people have done overseas stuff, but it's not as easy as one might think to get those courses back into the US in a way that institutions will recognize them. And so I ran into problems with that, and I ended up basically just resetting, and I did a master's degree at the Colorado School for Traditional Chinese Medicine in Denver, and I got licensed after that, and then about a year out from that, I decided if I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound, and I went ahead and did Pacific College's, I think they call it a transitional doctorate. Um, so that's sort of the short version.
okay, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a bit of a circuitous path to Chinese medicine. I certainly didn't know anything about acupuncture or TCM when I was looking at schools. I initially was looking at like chiropractic schools and you know I don't even know how the two connected. I had a background in Chinese in martial arts when I was a kid too, so maybe that made it something that seemed like a possibility, but I didn't know anything about it until I went to school.
Right.
Um, yeah. Okay. So how long have you been in practice now? And do you have like a specialty or a focus?
So the practice question is also a tricky one because, in practice legally or in practice not legally,
Nothing
right?
that'll incriminate you on this podcast.
So I finished my master's degree in 2016, but by the
Mhm,
time I finished my master's degree, I'd actually been studying Chinese medicine for like 14, 15 years. So it's
mhm. Yeah.
so in practice and licensed basically since 2016. Um, I focus mainly on pain management. Uh, I when people ask me that question, I tend to answer with the things that I don't work on because there are some places where Chinese medicine, while it can be effective there, they're not. That's not my wheelhouse. I really don't have any interest in it. So I don't take fertility patients, and I don't do any of like the facial rejuvenation stuff. Uh,
Mhm,
but outside of that, I've got patients all the way across the spectrum from people that are more, AFib, digestive problems, IBS. I've got some ulcerative colitis and Crohn's people, but probably 80, 90% is pain
Mhm.
of various sorts. So,
Okay. And so you are another person who reached out to me because of the podcast that I had with Gretchen Badami
yes.
and triggered some how do I say it? It made you feel like reaching out. So why don't you tell me kind of what the feelings were, what the thoughts were, why you decided to take it so far as to actually tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I got something to say."
Well, so I watched that podcast and I saw a lot of so one, it showed up randomly, and I think it was in my Facebook feed. It just kind of showed up randomly. And so I went and watched it on YouTube, and I watched your follow up with, what was it, Molly?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
Molly.
and so I watched that one too. Um, Both of them are very interesting, but the things that stood out to me with Gretchen were some of the numbers that you guys were throwing around as far as how much it costs to start up a clinic, and it to me, I'm just like, if you're walking out of a master's degree or a doctorate, freshly licensed, and you're looking at starting up a solo clinic, and you're tossing around those kinds of numbers, you deserve to fail because it
Okay.
just I mean, unless you have those kinds of resources available, and some people do, and if you do, God bless you, right? Go forth and prosper. But the vast majority of people that are leaving programs, they're tapped. That's where I was. I was tapped.
Mhm.
Um, and I think if we plan on walking into a situation where I'm coming fresh out of a graduate program, newly licensed, and you're looking at a multi-room clinic with staff and insurance billers, you are out of your mind. My first gig was a 1099 contractor in the basement of a chiropractic office, and I had a single treatment room, and that ran me $400 a month. The beauty of acupuncture really is acupuncture needles are cheap, and you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get going. Um, if you have the money to spend, like I said, go with God. But if you don't have that kind of money to spend, there are all kinds of other alternate arrangements that you can make. I rented that space out of the chiropractor's office. I leased a space inside of an acupuncturist's office. I worked as a 1099 contractor, in a spa where I had, those kinds of relationships where you're walking into like a spa or somebody else's clinic, that's like a built-in referral base. And if you can set up an arrangement where you're doing like a 60-40 split rather than just paying cash on the barrelhead for that room, that incentivizes people to actually refer to you. You know, I'd been in practice for almost 4 years by the time I got to a place where I was like, "Okay, 1, I need solo space because I have enough people coming in now that I need more rooms than what I can get here," right? And 2, I have enough people coming in that I can't manage it all myself, and I'm gonna need some front end help, right? So I didn't look at doing any of that until I'd been in practice for almost 5 years. And that's when I hired.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should, over, indebt themselves or overextend themselves by signing a lease that they can't afford and not having a clear plan in place and any of that kind of stuff. Um obviously it would be smart to kind of, start from the ground and build yourself up as you accrue patience and revenue. But that is something that no pathway has been laid out that's clear. Nobody's giving advice to students that are saying, option A, find a place where you can practice and get paid to practice by somebody in somebody else's clinic. Option B, start your own practice, but start small, rent a room, find somebody that will do some kind of split with you, whatever. Like I don't think that there's very much coaching around how to go about starting at all. I think the stupid little business class that most people get taken through in most programs, with a book written in the 90s, where you have to sort of make a mock business plan. It was just a feckless class that didn't provide any real value or orient you in any kind of way, as far as how to start. But I think what you're saying is good advice. I think that you should be realistic and start small and be conservative in terms of how you begin. But that is also very market dependent. Here in Austin, even a single room, depending on what part of town you're in, could be, $2 to $5,000, right? So maybe you have to find places outside of the city with less foot traffic as a place to start, or maybe you have to call a bunch of acupuncturists and see if they need help. Maybe you could be doing hourly work at their clinic, administrative kinds of things while you're trying to build your own practice, whatever it is. I just think that the conversation about what the options are, what the things that can be tried are, is the place to start. And I don't think you guys even get that. I mean, is that your experience, or do
Well,
you think that?
so, my business, so one, I agree that the business class that we got could have been light years better. But the business class that I got in my final semester or trimester at school was actually not so bad. I wouldn't say that it was completely worthless, because we didn't run out of a book. Um, what we did was at the end of that class, you had an LLC, right? So all of the homework assignments were structured in terms of go out to the State Department of Revenue website and do this and do that, right? And so you had to, by the time we were done with that class, I had an NPI. Um, I had an LLC container already built. I had all of this stuff basically already ready to go. Now, sort of where that class fell down was, okay, now what the fuck do I do with all this, right?
Right.
And so there, you kind of had to figure it out. Your whole thing talking about Austin and that kind of taps into one of my other big bones that I have to pick with acupuncturists, which is, there's more to this country than the 40 or 45 states that we actually have any large presence in, right?
Hmm.
And so, I see a lot of stuff. So one, I completely disagree with all of this push towards insurance. I think that's a complete boondoggle, especially Medicare. I get why people want it, but the bottom line is taking insurance doesn't bring you more people. It just costs you in terms of overhead. Everyone who's taking insurance right now is underpaid by the insurance industry. I've got a younger brother he's a family doc. He's a GP, and I just had dinner with him last week, and his biggest complaint is insurance, right? And it's at a time when people are opening direct primary care and people are setting up concierge clinics, the fact that we're trying to run down this insurance because we're not going to win that fight, right? And if the MDs didn't win that fight, we're not going to win that fight. So just just let it go. Let it go. Um, but the thing about Medicare in particular is, there's 50 states, 50 states in this country, and really only, I mean, the last data that I saw, 44% of us practice in 3 of those, right?
Hmm.
There's a senator from Iowa has no reason to care, right? Representatives from Nebraska, they don't give a single shit about Chinese medicine. And maybe people in California who are practicing Chinese medicine care about that. Maybe they don't. But when you're talking about introducing a national initiative like trying to get acupuncturists added as recognized providers under Medicare, every single vote counts. And if you've only got the senators and the representatives from a handful of states, you're not going anywhere in a big hurry, right? And that's the position that we're in right now is You have a handful of senators and representatives. You've got a bill. Your bill has been introduced to the floor and it's made it into committee and it's failed in committee for like what, 2 years running? And that's on the House side. You're gonna have to repeat all that on the Senate side. This is a 10-15 year process minimum. And now, we've put ourselves in a situation where MCCS has already approved acupuncture for low back pain. I probably get 2 or 3 calls a month from seniors who are asking me about it. And I'm like, yeah, they've approved it, but I can't do it. You're gonna have to find somebody else, right? Um, so it doesn't the way that we've gone about this doesn't make any sense. Insurance isn't going to bring you people. You probably need to do cash. But the other thing, I mean, outside of VACCN, my practice is cash. I've got a 2 week deep waiting list. Every now and then, I will get someone who calls and says, "I need you to check with my insurance to see if I have acupuncture coverage." And I'll say, "Look, I don't take insurance." And that's the last I hear from that person. The vast majority of the time, people will call and ask if I take insurance, and I'll say no. And they'll go, "Well, what do you charge?" And I'll tell them what I charge, and they go, "Oh, that's super reasonable." And they come in anyway. Right. So I'm not losing out on a lot of stuff. But, to wind this back to where I started, we have got to spread ourselves out more geographically if you're planning on doing anything useful from a national level, right? I mean, I practice in the state of Missouri. There's less than 200 of us. My Before I practiced in Missouri, I practiced in Kansas, and in Kansas, my license number was 36. Right,
That's pretty cool though. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it's nuts. It's nuts that we've backed ourselves into this corner.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think that my approach and kind of my message to everybody that I talk to that cares what I have to say is that when it comes to the insurance game, and when it comes to the logistics of regulation and advocacy and all of these things, like you're playing with a game where you're contending with a beast that is outside of the powers of what you can control. I understand the want to be able to have insurance kind of solve all the problems in terms of sending you referrals. Essentially, that's the primary reason I think people are interested in being able to offer insurance coverage is that they get sent referrals. But from my perspective, that's not a hard thing to sort out. Like there's so many channels where you can set up advertising, you can set up social media, you can do organic prospecting, you can like there's 10,000 different ways to promote yourself that aren't reliant upon somebody else deciding how many people you should get per month. And the other side of that is how much you should get paid for that. And then forget about the logistics of, you know, them denying payments or delaying payments or the fact that how all of that changes every time there's a new vote, every time there's a new person making a decision. Like, back in the 90s, my uncle was a chiropractor. He'd been a chiropractor for 20 years. He quit and went back to school because he was so sick and tired of the fluctuations in California for insurance pay related to what they got paid out for chiropractics. I think they've since then kind of sorted it out for chiropractors at least. But um, I also just talked to a gal, Lisa Poole, who's been an acupuncturist for 18 years, and she has a Facebook channel where she's essentially showing people how to get student loan forgiveness. Um, but she has literally been on councils, in cities. She had submitted bills for approval to Congress. She tried to do the things that you're talking about, and after 18 years, she's calling it quits because it's too hard. So, yeah, hear you on all of that. I think it's more worth your time to control what you can control, and relying on somebody else to tell you how much your time is worth. Or who is going to come through your front doors. It's just not something that's safe. It doesn't have security built into it. It's not something that um I would advise. So I'm with you there. But I think where it deviates is that I also know and have clients that accept insurance and are happy with it. Like every once in a while, a program will come out in New Jersey right now. Municipal workers can get their acupuncture covered, and it pays well. It pays like $300 per modality, I think, or something like that. Um, and so those things do happen, but it's like the exception, right? Are you gonna set your sights on the hoping for the thing that's not likely, um, or not? Yeah. So that was a rant. Sorry about that. I don't
Um,
know. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you want to take anything that I just said and jump back in. I'm pretty much validating what you're saying. I
yeah,
agree with you.
you haven't said anything that I super disagree with yet. So
Yeah, yeah. This is the other side though, is that I think that nothing's going to change for acupuncture until our medicine is accepted as medicine and not woo. I think that that's starting to happen, you know, with MDs being able to offer, their 300-hour seminar on trigger points as acupuncture inside of hospitals, with PTs being able to do, quote unquote, dry needling, and you know, there's other people that can offer some form of acupuncture. It's because people are wanting it, right? And rather than creating a pathway where people can specialize as MDs in something like alternative medicine, TCM, that kind of stuff. They're trying to hack it and do some watered down version of it because they're not invested enough in the medicine to treat it like real medicine. It's like they're like placating their patients or something like that by having something that they're calling that. And so until you guys are credentialed in the same way that MDs are, it's never going to be treated as real medicine. And if it's never treated as real medicine, then what you said is absolutely true. What congressperson is going to give a shit? Well, what insurance company is going to feel like they have to have an answer to this that is kind of standardized and, established as the rule. Um, and, and in order to have acceptance for the medicine, it's you guys that have to ring the bell, which means that you have to have the hard conversations. And in spite of it taking 18 years to get anywhere with anything, maybe that needs to be a part of the landscape of what you guys do. But I also don't think that being fringe and being rogue and, having cash-based practices is a bad thing. I don't think it diminishes anything. I don't think that credentials have anything to do with efficacy. And I think our over reliance on the people that get to have the voice, being the people with the letters after their names, that went to the colleges that we recognize, that are part of the clubs that we've signed off on as being, authority. I don't think that's good for us either. I think that even in terms of your own experience, you're talking about apprenticing essentially with people that probably know way more about the medicine than a lot of the teachers that taught us in the credentialed schools, wouldn't you say?
yeah, so I actually sat down one time and because I very occasionally blog. I don't know if you checked out my website or anything, but I do very occasionally blog. And I had a blog post that I was thinking about posting, but I ended up not posting it. Um, but the thing of it is if I think back on all of the apprenticeship, going to China, all of it, if I think back on that and I go, okay, where did I actually learn the most about what I do today, right? I would say that it was probably in the apprenticeship and then going to China, which are exactly the two things that didn't count at all, right? Um, and so, I look at a lot of the schools and I know that schools are closing down and the reasons are varied and complicated and mostly tie back to return on investment, which is another one of my bones to pick, right? Because we're increasingly making it longer and more costly to become a licensed practitioner of Chinese medicine at a time when there's just not, right? I mean, we're in this weird space, and the trick there is I'm super interested in history. Like, so my undergraduate degree is in anthropology, and so I'm always interested in why do things look like they look today, right? And so when you're talking about figuring out how do acupuncturists get to some level of parity, assuming that's even what we want. The AMA had a plan to put MDs where they put them. And they executed that plan over the course of almost 100 years, right? Um, and if you were to go back in a time machine to like the late 1800s and you were to look at the medical landscape at that point, and you were to ask yourself, what's going to be the predominant mode of, you know, medical delivery in the future, you probably would have said homeopathy. There were more schools of homeopathy in this country. There were more practitioners of homeopathy in more places. And what happened was the AMA went to homeopaths, so that the MDs went to homeopaths and they said, "Look, we get that you guys are really popular, and we see that some of your stuff works. How about we move homeopathy into medical schools?" Right?
Mm.
And the homeopaths were like, "That's fantastic." And so a lot of the standalone homeopathic schools closed. They moved their programs into regular medical colleges, right? And then what happened? They passed some laws. They took the homeopathic remedies that worked and they said, well, okay, these work, but you got to be able to prescribe, right? So they took the homeopathic stuff that worked and they made it available only by prescription. So essentially, they locked homeopaths out of their own medicine. And then the medical schools very slowly did away with the homeopathic programs after many of the homeopathic colleges closed. And so now in the United States, there are no schools of homeopathy. You can walk into a grocery store and buy the little pills for a cold or something like that. And I'm not making any value judgments on homeopathy here. It doesn't matter one way or another. All I'm saying is that ABMA certs and physical therapists dry needling and, moving some of these modalities lifted from their full model context and putting them into medical schools and physical therapy programs. This is a dumb thing to for us to let happen, right? Because what's going to happen is somebody not fully trained is going to be doing stuff and their stuff isn't going to work as well. And they're going to go, well, clearly this stuff doesn't work anyway. And they're going to start to phase it out. And they'll start to phase it out after most of the schools of Chinese medicine have closed. And then at that point, there won't be any acupuncture in the US anymore. And
Yeah.
that's probably the way things are going to go. And I just don't, it bothers me that there are so many people who don't bother to figure out why medicine looks the way that it does, right? Medicine is very much a cultural artifact. Medicine in the West is no different in that regard. And medicine in the West has a track record. It does stuff to preserve its position on the hierarchy. Sometimes those things are overt and they're very much deliberate. And sometimes those things are just a side effect of the way the system works. But if you walk into that room and you're completely ignorant of what has gone on in the past and what's going on now, you're going to get fucked. And I don't understand why we're doing this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. Like these are the things that I think we don't feel like we can say anymore. Like at the end of the day, I'm just gonna plant my flag right now. So at the end of the day, the reason that people went into TCM, acupuncture, alternative medicine is because they had a problem with allopathic medicine. Like there's things about holistic medicine that appealed to you and they are antithetical to the common allopathic method of prescribing medicine and managing, sick care essentially. And that's real. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that. Somewhere along the way, we decided that we got to play nice and we have to become vetted and credentialed and we have to ascribe. I know it sounds like I'm doing a 180. I'm trying, like there's a certain amount of this where I'm trying to give people space to have a voice. And I'm trying to, sort of nurture the conversation in the podcast format that enables people to speak freely and feel supported and be validated and be seen and all these kinds of things. And I don't always agree with the people that I say that I agree with. But I don't want to like shine you guys on either. I have my own opinions when it comes to this kind of stuff. I just don't have the answers for what we do about the state of acupuncture right now. But I absolutely agree with you. I think you're better off forging your own path and everything that comes with that. Like that's not secured, right? There's no um hill for lack of a better word, that can be swallowed. It's going to guarantee your guys' success, guarantee acceptance for our medicine, guarantee that there's no pitfalls that need to be contended with that are going to be insurmountable. Like forging your own path is hard. It's a rogue path, but there's more technology tools and ways of disseminating information now in order to advocate for what the medicine can do, in order to educate the audience who you're trying to attract, in order to get people to come through your doors. Like like it's never been easier from that perspective. I know it feels like overwhelming for everybody because it's essentially technology and everybody has a certain amount of tech overwhelm, but it's totally feasible to have a cash-based practice where you never mess with insurance. You live in a place that's rural. Maybe you even have an online offer where you can monetize a website through e-com or coaching services or things that are not connected to your time in terms of people walking through your doors. There's plenty of people that are doing that in all kinds of spaces. You could just open up TikTok and see that happening every third swipe. You're going to see people that are selling a program that's online, and you guys can be that too because you have something that has value and that people are interested in. So I'm with you there. But like the issue that I think that we keep wrestling with on every single one of these podcasts is where you see the dance that we're doing. It's that, okay, I don't want to say the wrong thing that is going to make a target on my back about how egregious the medical system has become in this country. And at the same time, figure out a financial balm that is going to solve and alleviate the failure rates of the country. I think the first problem was essentially that we allowed the feds to fund the schools, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I've been thinking about this. This is one of the other things that I've been thinking about because, like I said, I'm in Missouri. I'm in the northwest corner of Missouri, right? So this is a very rural area. The town that I live in is actually shrinking. I think the last numbers that I saw, 73,000 people, right? But it's headed down. It's not headed
Hmm.
up. Um, and the thing of it is, there are no schools of Chinese medicine inside of an hour or 2 from here, right? And yes, it would be nice if people went to the existing schools of Chinese medicine and then relocated to places like Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, right? And it, would come and sort of fill in the middle where we largely are not right now. Yeah, I think the closest school to me here would probably be a toss up between Northwestern and Minneapolis, some of the schools in Chicago and then Denver, right? Those are probably the closest to here. Um, but NCCAOM, while they did away with the full apprenticeship program, they still support a hybrid, right? So you can do 18 months of school and then 18 months under an approved mentor in an apprenticeship. So you do not have to basically you could cut your costs, right? And then that becomes a revenue center for those of us who are mentors, right? So we can charge for that, but you could theoretically undercut the schools at that point, right? Because I've got somebody who has been coming in sort of dancing around. I'd really like to study Chinese medicine. And so I've looked into it and I meet NCCAOM's requirements to be a mentor. So that part's not an issue. So, what would I charge for 18 months? That, I got to figure that out, but I would almost certainly charge less than, 18 months of formal schooling. And for those of us that are in these states that are essentially underserved, right? Now, that's not super portable, right? That's the downside, which is where, I think we need to put an eyeball on. And this is the thing that I bounce back and forth on too. Is it even really worthwhile to have a state practice license? I mean, what does that honestly do for us besides become a revenue center for the state, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that needs to be sort of contended with is this that I've been thinking a lot about this, the idea of credentialing.
Right.
That is how we know that we're not buying something that's fake. Somebody else has we're outsourcing vetting essentially. We're saying that somebody important,
Right.
somebody smart, somebody that has my best interests at heart is going to look out for me, and because they have formalized the process of credentialing, I can trust the institution. I can trust the letters after people's names.
Right.
And that
But
is going to
but
be,
the situation that we're in right now already shows that that's bullshit because
yes.
physical therapists are dry needling, chiropractors are sticking needles in people with 100 hours or less. You've got MDs that are doing 300-hour programs. Maybe in most states, an MD can read a book and go, ah, you know what? Acupuncture, that's the ticket. And they can do whatever they want, right? So does it really require the level of education that we're currently mandating, right? I don't know that it does. If a physical therapist can go and dry needle someone after 80 hours of weekend seminars, does it really take 3,000 hours on a degree specific to Chinese medicine, right? Yeah, physical therapists, they do damage people from time to time, but so do we, right? We do too. So really, what's the line here? Is it so easy that a caveman can do it? In which case, there's really no point in regulating it. Just let anybody do it, right? Or does it require a certain level of education? And if it does, in fact, require a certain level of education, then everyone who's doing it has to meet that bar. We can't have any of this. Some people can do this and some people can do that. And oh, you're in a gray area in terms of your practice act. Fuck all that. Either you can or you can't.
Yeah, I mean, finding I do think that there's a balance to be struck between Wild West, anybody can do whatever they want to do, whoever makes the nicest website and convinces the most people, let them have at it, and there should be no safety or no regulations around that, versus it's all regulated and we're fully included in the AMA system of medicine, and we have to follow all their rules and be credentialed in all the ways and spend all the money on the education. Like somewhere in between those two things, I think is probably where the answer lay. There have to be some health, safety, efficacy. There has to be some guidelines so that an uninformed audience can sort of navigate how to decide whether or not a person is qualified to put needles into their bodies. Um, but what that looks like, I do not claim to have the answer to that. I think it's a slippery slope. I think the more you try to play the game with the kind of a corporatized style of bureaucracy and decision trees, the more that you play with them, the less control you have, and ultimately it never seems to work out in anybody's favor but the organization itself, the
That's
authority body.
that's by design,
Yeah.
right? That's by design.
Right.
But I think, the deal is that right now you have, and this is just my opinion, right now, you have chiropractors and physical therapists essentially preying on the ignorance of the general populace, offering the services that they offer with the level of training that they have.
Right.
It's the sole fact that ABMA at least exists and doctors have to do at least 300 hours. I think it's 300 hours of didactic and 500 documented patient contacts, right?
Yeah.
So essentially the argument that physical therapists and chiropractors are making is they need less training than a medical doctor if they're going to do this, right? Which
Right.
which is absolute nonsense, right? So if ABMA is the standard for people who already have a healthcare degree, then ABA's scope needs to be expanded to cover everyone who could potentially do this thing. And if a physical therapist wants to dry needle, they have to get an ABMA cert. It seems very simple to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how simple it is, because I think there's so many different categories of concern baked into all of this. I think if how do you get paid? What quality of education? How do we regulate safety? Who can practice where? Who's overseeing what? What does scope look like? If we are going to start sharing the modality with other types of doctors, if a chiropractor is allowed to do it, and an MD is allowed to do it, and PT is allowed to do it, I mean, is the nurse allowed to do it? Are they going to start doing it? Who else is going to be? And
I
and
I
how do
I would
we how
I
do
would
we
think
decide?
I would think nurses should be on that list before DCs and DPTs, frankly, because nurses at least have part of their core curriculum is training with needles.
Yeah, right.
So, my thing is CNT, if you're gonna be sticking needles in people, CNT should be standard across the board, right?
Mhm,
You gotta have a clean needle technique cert. If you're gonna be jabbing needles in people, you gotta have that. And then
mhm,
after that, it's either NCCAOM or ABMA, and I don't care who you are.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I I don't really know what else to say. I think I think that, like, this is another example of somebody that, reached out to me because there was some issue of contention, right? Like, we didn't agree on something, or we had a different perspective on something, and then we had a conversation, and we actually agree about most of the things. We agree that there's a problem,
Yep.
and we agree that we can't play this game of play nice with everybody and try to follow the system, and don't plant your flag and speak up too much and say the wrong thing. You got to sort of hide your head so that we get the approval that we need to be able to be given permission to occupy a space in the medical community at large, like all of that. Like, that's the slippery slope. I totally am with you on that. I think that we live in a time where you literally have your own advertising channel at your fingertips that are free. There are systems and protocols that anybody can pay by numbers to follow. Like, it's possible to have success whether you're good at what you do or not, actually, quite frankly. And you should be good at what you do. You should have ethics. Like everybody got into this medicine because they care about people and their nurturers, and that's kind of the heart of our medicine. And I would like to believe that love conquers all, and that the heart that's connected to what we do will prevail. But I also see how wounded the population of acupuncturists are because of all this bullshit that you guys are contending with, because of what's happening to the industry at large, because of the dysfunction, native within the allopathic medicine model. It's not good for patients. It's not good for the doctors. It's too expensive. It's just it's a problem. It's a problem that needs to be sorted, and I don't have all the answers. What I'm essentially advocating for is, like, stop trying to play a game that you can't win. Let's figure out a game that you can win. Let's figure out what you can control. Let's figure out what you can affect outcomes on, and let's focus our attention on that. That's what I'm saying. That's all that I'm saying. As far as the rest of it, like, oof, when I was talking to Lisa, it just broke my heart. Like the amount of fight this lady has had for almost 2 decades, the amount of care and concern to that she is, like, hanging her hat and saying, I don't think I'm going to be an acupuncturist anymore. Man, those are the people that you need in your community. Whether she was applying her energy in a way that you or I would say it was a waste of time or not, it's that fire in the belly that needs to be the voice of our community, I think, at minimum. And if people like her um, are hanging their hat up, then who else is going to step in? Um, We need a voice. We need people to be able to see you guys. You have to be visible. That's sort of what this podcast is about, is creating at least a space that makes it possible for some of y'all to be visible. And then we'll just see where the conversation goes. Um, one thing that I like to do at the end of all of these podcasts is to try to find silver lining. see see if there's something that you have that is hope for people that might be listening, or if there's something that you've figured out that you think other people can figure out too. And if you have a happy message to
I honestly, because I practiced. So when I practiced in Colorado, I was extremely rural. I was in an area that was 14,000 people, and that's really too small. And when I left Colorado and I went to the Kansas side of Kansas City, the KC Metro is in excess of 2 million people, right? And that's too much to get your arms around. Um, what I would advocate for is find those pockets of, say, more than 20,000 but less than 100,000. My big deal is I was watching a documentary one time, and they were talking about Chinese restaurants and why there's Chinese restaurants everywhere. I mean, you drive into small town Tennessee and there's a Chinese restaurant there, right? the Chinese immigrant community did that on purpose, right? So people would come in on the East Coast and the West Coast, and the very first thing that they would do is they would teach them how to run a Chinese restaurant and how to make it profitable. And then they would move them out because they didn't want to create these super insular communities because they were already being discriminated against and they didn't want any more of that. And so they moved people to other places in the country where there wasn't already a huge Chinese expat population. And those people would open a Chinese restaurant and they could contribute to the community. They could make enough money to survive and they could raise their kids and everyone's happy. Right. And why we're not following that model, I don't understand. But what I would say is if you're graduating from school and you're in a large metro area where there's already a lot of established acupuncturists, get out, go somewhere else. Right. And I get it. People go to school in the places where they live. And I totally understand that. But, my graduating class was about 17 people when I got my master's. And I've kept in touch with a chunk of them, and some of them, probably a little bit more than half, aren't practicing anymore because you can't walk around downtown Denver and throw a rock and not hit an acupuncturist's office. They're thick as weeds down there. So go somewhere else, right? Find a small town somewhere. My argument would be is if the town has enough people in it to support a chiropractor, it can support you, right?
Mm.
Go there, work with the chiropractor, find a med spa. There are tons of people who are interested in bringing acupuncturists in, even just to give it a try, right? If you can step into something where you're doing like a referral and a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split, where you're not on the hook for lease money every month, you can build a practice that way. And I mean, for the, so when I came to town here for probably the first 6 months, I was still living in Kansas City. And I would drive up here from Kansas City for one or two people, right? And I was just very consistent about that. And if you're any good at all, and you can be very consistent about showing up, the people eventually will come to see you. Word will get around. And this is the big thing that I learned in Kansas City. I could have somebody come in Kansas City and I could do a treatment for them and I could absolutely knock it out of the park. Like 1, 2 treatments and their problem was gone. And you know who they talk to about that? No one, because in big cities, people don't talk to each other, right? I came up here and I would treat a couple of people and get results, right? And all of a sudden, I've got their brother and their sister and their next door neighbor, right? Word of mouth. So I run television ads. I have stuff online. I'm telling you, probably 90% of the people who walk through my door haven't seen any of that stuff. They talked to somebody who had been to see me before. That takes time to cultivate. But if you invest the time and you cultivate that word of mouth, especially in rural areas, people will talk. They'll talk to their neighbors, they'll talk to their friends, they'll talk to their aunts and their uncles and their grandparents. You will get people. You just have to show up.
Yes, I think that I probably I always say that, referral based practices work like 15% of the time. That is because uh that I'm just taking into account the statistic that 85% of acupuncturists fail, right? And then and then in addition to that, the majority of the people that get to stability in their practice, they have really strong referral based practices. Some of them figured out marketing and have people that they pay to advertise them and appointments and that kind of stuff, but not most of them. Most of them don't. Most of them do referral based practices. But I think that that sounds kind of grave and bad and not like a good statistic. But I think you said something that makes a lot of sense to me, and it has to do with what kind of community exists in these smaller towns compared to urban centers. And in an urban center, it's much harder to be a big fish in a big pond. It's a lot easier to be a big fish in a small pond. And you're absolutely right. I used to live in Idaho when I was a kid, and that's what it was like. My dad was actually a chef. He trained at the Cordon Bleu, and so when we came to town, uh, the kind of food that he made was not something that they were used to. But once people caught wind of it, they would literally drive for 3 hours to come to the restaurant because it was the only thing like it, in 300 miles or something like that. So that's very much a thing. That is absolutely a thing, and it's a important difference in terms of community to realize. You sort of have to figure out what kind of community you want to live in. You could say that it might be easier to fill a practice or assume that it might be easier to fill a practice in a big urban environment, but it's also a lot harder to stand out. Um, Now, from my perspective, in terms of marketing, I think that you need to at least have enough of a population density that you've run the numbers and you figure out how many people, what percentage of the population could you actually treat inside of your clinic. So that'll inform you of how big the population needs to be. If you can determine, that the amount of people in a place, of those people, how many of them do we think would be open to acupuncture and be repeat patients? We can break it down to some kind of percentage, right? And then the ability to disseminate that, you can sort of figure out, okay, so basically I need to do, you know, 100 treatments a month or 100 treatments a week. What does that look like for you in terms of the pricing of things? How much can you charge in a rural environment compared to the urban environment? There's a way to reduce this to a formula that is just doing the math and then making some decisions based on the math. Do I want to live somewhere where I have to do 100 treatments a week, or would it be better to live somewhere where I only have to do 30 treatments a week? You got to figure that out for yourself. But I love what you're saying around that. I do think that there's power in having a referral based practice that is successful, and there's no reason that you can do a bit of both, right? You can market yourself and have referral based practice in a
And
community
and
that's
that's
that's kind of
exactly
medium
what
to
I do.
small.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure, sure. Awesome. Okay, well, Jeff, this has been another cool conversation. I don't know if we got anywhere, but we certainly agreed about a lot of things, and I enjoyed talking to you. And you changed my point of view on some of this stuff, so I appreciate that. I always appreciate that. If anybody wants to reach out to you, see what you have to say on your blog, or get involved with you in some kind of a way, where should they find you?
So my webpage is jracu.com. So jracu.com. All my contact information, at least from a business perspective, is there. I have a profile on Facebook. To be honest, I use it rarely. But you can always hit me up there. I'll respond eventually.
Okay, Dr. Jeff Rippey, I appreciate you, and thank you for reaching out to me. And
Thank you.
yeah, we'll catch everybody on the next one. Bye, brother. I appreciate that. I think, I think, yeah, you pulled kind of me out of my shell a little bit in terms of how I actually feel about things, and makes me a little nervous, but that's what I signed up for, and I hope I just we can't pretend how we feel about these things and expect people to get invested in what we have to say.
Right. Well,
So,
I think you're absolutely right, and I see this a lot. I'm not super involved in at the state association level. I tried to get involved early on. Too many games, too clicky, and I was just like, you know what, I'm out. But the thing of it is we're too nice. We spend
mhm,
too much time, and I think actually having this conversation with you kind of solidified my thinking. I think what a lot of people do is they confuse the system for the person. And they think
mhm,
if they criticize the system, they're actually criticizing the MDs and the nurses and the physical therapists and everybody who's working inside that system. And that's not the case. Medical doctors, by and large, don't go to medical school because they feel like, that some of them do, right? Some of them go because they want to make oodles and oodles of cash, right? And that's one way to do it, right?
right,
But most of them, they go into medicine because they genuinely wanna help people. They go into medicine for the same reasons we do, right? They
yeah,
genuinely wanna help people. And, a lot of them don't like the system either, right?
right,
It's just that most acupuncturists never get the opportunity or never take the opportunity to actually sit down and have a conversation with, you know medical doctors and MDs and DOs and PTs. I mean, I'm friends with a chunk of the PTs in town. I have at least passing relationships with a lot of the chiropractors in town. You can sit down at a table and have a conversation with these guys. Well, they will tell you shit that they would never talk about in public, right? And those are the conversations that we need to tease out because nobody's really happy with the system the way that it works. Nobody.
Right. Yeah,
So,
because it's not in anybody's best interest other than the people that are profiting the most. Like,
yeah,
that's really what it comes down to is
yeah,
who signed up for this? Like, do you think the doctors want to only be able to spend 5 minutes with each patient and then they have to they're required to, use certain whatever it is, the
right.
surgery, the medical devices, the pharmaceutical products, like on and on and on. They're like vendors
Uh-huh.
for
Right.
for
Well, but
for these things.
again, so there you're bumping up against cultural, right?
Yeah.
So in the West, culturally, we've decided that medicine is really one of 2 things, and if you don't fall into either one of those buckets, you're not medical, right?
Yeah.
So either I'm putting stuff into you or I'm cutting you open and taking something out, and if I'm
Right.
not doing one of those 2 things, then it's not
Right.
medicine, right?
Right.
And that's why chiropractors and physical therapists and massage therapists and acupuncturists, that's why we all get the short end of the stick. You
Yeah.
know, herbal medicine kind of falls into that paradigm, but acupuncture almost certainly does not. And
No.
so, you're essentially in a place where you have to convince people that this is in fact medical, even though I'm not meeting your medical expectations.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think one of the things that is actually a blessing in disguise, but it sounds weird to say that, but one of the things that COVID did for alternative medicine is it disrupted people's faith in the institutions that is supposed to exist to protect them.
Oh,
And that's where you see such a huge influx of people that are considering modalities that they've never heard of, that they've never considered before, that are actually wanting a different type of medicine and exploring it. Um, and yeah, the markets are saying that it's all driving that in that direction.
so
So
I don't have this conversation very often with very many people, but the single
mhm,
best thing that happened to my business was COVID.
yeah, yeah. For the ones that survived,
Yeah, right,
I
for the
think it
ones that
was a
survive.
good. I guess we don't need to go there too. How many people can we
So
upset
what
with
what
what?
really quick before you go, because I'm curious, you said that I changed your mind on something. What did I change your mind on?
So the thing that I had never considered in term well, like I the things that I agree with you on is that I think it's stupid to try to change the entire medical system as an acupuncturist and play nice, get the credential, work in hospitals, be a part of the insurance system, like because I don't think any of that is ethically aligned with how TCM is structured and its perspective on health and wellness. I just you sick care, healthcare versus sick care. That's fundamental different. That's where we align. In terms of you know moving out into rural areas, that is something that I'd never considered because from my perspective, it's a numbers game. If you don't have a dense enough population, then the possibility even of doing enough treatments is not enough, and you tend to have to charge less and all of that. But I had never considered that rural communities are very gossipy, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It can be, but the positive side of that script is that they absolutely do refer. They talk to each other. You can become the local celebrity, the doctor that every community should have at least one doctor that is trusted by the community, and there's no reason that couldn't be an acupuncturist in a rural area. I think that most people tend to assume that the more rural it is, the more conservative it is, the more conservative it is, the less open it is to things like Eastern medicine and that kind of stuff. And I'm just not sure if that's true anymore.
That's not true at all in my experience. People who
Yeah.
it was a buddy of mine that actually talked me into moving because where I am now is where I grew up, and I
Hmm.
had 0 interest in coming back here, but a friend of mine was like, "Look, just come up here and give it a try," and he kept twisting my arm, and I was like, "Look, it's not gonna be a thing there. People are not gonna come in," and I was 100% wrong.
Hmm.
And probably a good 30-40% of my patient base are farmers. Um,
Right.
and they love coming in because they work around heavy machinery and they have a lot
Right.
of pain, right? And
Yeah.
they can't do drugs that are gonna make them loopy. But I'll tell you, I work 4 days a week.
Mhm.
I'm in my office Wednesday through Saturday, and Saturday's not even a full day. I usually leave here at 3. Um, and a slow week for me is 85, 87. Right?
Wow.
Most weeks are 115 to 120.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
that's intense.
you can absolutely do it, right? In
Right.
rural area in an area like this, right? And
Yeah.
I've been working at that pace for probably 4.5 years, maybe 5.
Mhm. How long would you say that it took you to get to that pace?
Took me about 3 years.
Mhm. Yeah, well, there you go. I think it's important for people to hear those kinds of statistics because a lot of people just give up. And probably in terms of like even if let's just hypothetically, if you go to a rural area, it's harder to get people through the door because there's less people. Let's just say that's true, even if it's not true. Uh, the other side of that is the cost equation related to how much it costs to rent a space, how much it costs for all of your utilities, your overhead, your licenses, your insurance, gas, whatever. Living in a place like this, the first client that I had that was an acupuncturist had a clinic, and her break even overhead per month was $40,000.
Ouch.
Yeah. So, it is a big operation. She had 4 rooms and she had, 3 other practitioners and a massage therapist, and she had a front of house person. And, that's how you get a $40,000 break even bill per month. So, that when you're doing that, even if you're busy, 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 if you got into, 400 treatments just to be in the black, like, oh my goodness,
I'd have to pull out my Excel sheet, but my break even is probably less than 5.
5 treatments?
5,000,
Oh,
roughly
5,000. Yeah, yeah,
$5,000.
yeah, that makes
And
sense.
and when I'm seeing, when I see people at the rate that I see them, essentially, I've made all of the money that I need to make to cover my overhead in the first 2 weeks of every month.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
And
it feasible.
and then the
Yeah,
last 2 weeks are gravy.
yeah, yeah. That's how it should be. Absolutely how it should be. Yeah. All right, brother. Well, it's been an amazing chat. I'm a little backlogged right now with podcasts, so it'll be a few
Sure.
weeks before it's released, but I'll let you know. I appreciate the conversation and your openness to talk, and yeah, hopefully people will enjoy it.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too.
All right.
Bye.